of the Good Samaritan. Hundreds of times, thousands of times. And it gets to be difficult after a while to come up with something new or something different to say about it that you haven't already heard before. We've talked about, and I know you've heard from the perspective of the guy that was beat up. You know, I mean, he was a Jew, and to have a Samaritan touch him, that was like, remember when you were little and you got cooties, and you couldn't wait to get rid of the cooties? Think of like cooties to the nth degree. I mean, this actually made the Jew unclean to be touched by a Samaritan. Before he could go to temple, he would have had to go through all these ritual purifications to get the Samaritan germs off him. Looking from the perspective of the priest and the scribe that walked by. These were the religious leaders. These were people of importance in that day. You'd like to think that walking by and seeing someone, compassion would rule over everything else. And any other obligation that you might have had would have gone away so you could take care of the needs of that person. But both of these individuals were too myopic. They were too set on what they had to do and just walked on the other side. You've heard it from the perspective of the Samaritan. You know, the Samaritan was considered less than dirt by the Jews. Examples have been given of comparing the relationship between the Samaritan and Jew to a Jew and a Gestapo officer. Or an African American and someone with a hood on from the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we're talking just absolute hate isn't strong enough a word. I mean, you could see the Samaritan walking by and seeing the Jew on the ground bleeding and laughing, taking whatever he could that was left over, and then kicking and spitting on him, and then going home and telling his friends what he did so they could all buy him beers. I mean, that was the relationship that existed. Yet that's not what he did. He saw a person. He didn't see a Jew. And he didn't see himself as a Samaritan. He saw somebody that was hurting, and someone that had the wherewithal, that had the materials to take care of him, to bandage him up, to put him on his donkey, to take him to an inn so he could get care, and to pay for it. And to say, if it costs more than this, don't worry, I'll be back and take care of it later. Now, it doesn't tell us whether or not he did, but we have to assume that he did, because that's the way the story was going. So we've heard it from all these different perspectives. And as I was looking at it this year, looking at it from the notion of the Charter for Compassion that is out there in the back for you all to read, and there's a place out there for you to sign your name down as one that is standing up for the Charter. And I'd like to thank Bill Vinton for his time in making those big ones for me. Bill, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I kind of looked at it in a different way. Now, something else that's been part of my, about a month, I guess. So it's always, your context is what's happening in your life. Is Kathy and I have been watching this unbelievable series on the Discovery Channel called Africa. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. It's going to be repeated because they spent a fortune and 4 years on it. So if you get the Discovery Channel, I encourage you to turn this on and to watch it. I think it's a 6 or 7 part thing, an hour a week. And in it they talked about all the animals, the wildlife, the birds, the bugs, the fish, the flora, the fauna, just everything that was in Africa. Not just showing the beauty of it, but also obviously talking about how so much of it is in danger. 5,000 black rhinos left in the world in the wild. And only counted in the hundreds of the great mountain apes. And God's creatures. And they are becoming extinct at an alarming rate. All because of, quite frankly, the greed and the hubris of humanity. Because anything that exists in the world is ours. And we're going to take it. Why? Well, number one, because we want it. And number two, because we can. All the rhinoceros and all the great apes in the world could combine and still couldn't do anything to stop us. So we're going to take it. That's just the way the world has existed for millennia. Quite frankly, if you think about it, it's the way the United States of America came into being. Now, we came over here as English, primarily, at the beginning. Some French, some Spanish. I mean, we kind of came from all sides. And there were some Germans and Dutch and Irish. Europeans, how about we go with that? And we landed and we said, wow, this is cool. We like this. We think we'll call it the United States of America. And it'll be a democratic nation. And we think that we will write down that all men are created equal and free. Well, then people started having babies, which people do when they're happy. People do when they're not happy too, but people do when they get together, especially on those long, cold, winters when they didn't have TV and radio or anything else to do. So all of a sudden we need more land. So they said to themselves, what should we do? And they said, well, let's head west, young man, head west. Couldn't go east because there was an ocean. And as they headed west, what did they run into? Native Americans. Those that were called Indians. Buffalo, bear, beaver, fox. Oh my gosh, we've hit the mother lode. So when you've hit the mother lode, what do? Take advantage of it. Yes, you harvest it, but you harvest it to the point of, unfortunately, where it's completely ravaged. And those words that we wrote down, all men are created equal, all of a sudden we decided, well, now we've got to define that, because now we have people that are out there that are men, but they're really not men because they're savages. So how about we say all white Europeans are created equal? Yeah, that's it. So then we can have a clear conscience wiping them all out and taking everything we want, which is exactly what we did, which gave rise to us. So all of this is going through my mind as I'm reading these words, this parable from Jesus. And I came to think that neighbor actually means more than just people in need. And I don't think it would be pushing the envelope to say that Jesus would see it this way also. That when we think of being a good neighbor, it's in relationship not just with humanity, but with all of God's creation. We always have this fallback where we go to Genesis, to the creation story. And God created heaven and earth and all the wonderful things that were there. And then God created man and woman in God's own image. God created man and woman. And God said, you are to have dominion over the earth and over all the creatures of the sea and the birds and all that stuff. And we have read it for hundreds, for thousands of years. And we've looked at that dominion and we've hung our hat on that and said, see, God gave it to us to do whatever we want, and that really is a lot of garbage. Heaven's here, so it'd be cool. Garbage. It is an absolutely terrible interpretation of the word. What it says in the Hebrew that we have is that we were given all of this to be good stewards of. The first human being that was created was named. That wasn't his name. That was a designation of what he was. Dust creature, earth creature. brought forth from the dust and given breath by God. And over the centuries, over the millennia, we have read it and said, his name was Adam. No. Just like Jesus' middle name was not Jesus the Christ. That wasn't his name. Titles. Adam would have been a title, would have been a designation. Out of the earth you have come, and with the creatures of the earth you shall dwell, and shall be good neighbors. Shall watch over, shall protect, shall take care of those that are in need. And right now, the earth is in great need. Every day, at least 2 living entities that God created are going extinct. Now, granted, some of them are bugs. And as I was approaching this and I was thinking about this, I'll confess I have a hard time with the bugs. But God created the bugs. If God created everything, the bugs too, the bugs have to have a purpose in life. And in watching this show, Africa, you got a sense of why these bugs were so important. And you get rid of just one type of bug, and all of a sudden the whole ecosystem goes flooey, and everything falls apart. But see, we don't look that big a picture. It's what we want, so we take it because it's ours, because God gave it to us. And God's looking down going, have you read the book? Have you really read the book? Pay attention. And as I read the parable of the Good Samaritan, it really did resonate with me that this is not just about a person-to-person relationship or people-to-people relationship. The parable of the Good Samaritan for today's time, for us in the world that we live in, goes so much further than that. It is a story of the relationship between us and God's holy creation. It is God's creation that is lying on the ground, having been beaten and bruised, having been robbed and raped. And too many of us have walked by and looked and have gone to the other side and said, I'm too busy for this. I want a new big house, so we have to cut down more trees so I can have that house. I want a bigger and faster computer, so we have to go down and strip mine in Africa so that we can get the silicon and that which we need in order to make the chips so that we can have the bigger and faster computers. I want to have plenty of land around me, so I'm going to kill everything around me. I'm going to put a fence around it and take away the natural grazing land of animals that have been there from the very beginning. And then I'm going to shoot them down and kill them when they get in my way. Unfortunately, very few of us have taken the time to look and to see the world in pain, to see God's creation suffering, to accept that it is happening because of us, that there are things that each one of us as individuals can do to make an impact. That there are things that we as a congregation can do to make a larger impact. And just as the Good Samaritan gave the 2 denarii, so too we are called to use our resources to bring comfort and to bring healing to the individual, for us to bring comfort and healing to God's world. And then as we leave, just as the Good Samaritan left, realize that there might be more that needs to be done that we can do, and then covenanting to come back and do more. To realize that what we have done is not enough. And that if more is required of me, I will be back, just as the Good Samaritan promised to come to the innkeeper. Over the last century or so, I think that we, as Christianity, have lost our way as far as the relationship that we are called to have with God and with God's creation. The people of Jesus' time would have not thought about this because that would have been the way they lived. You didn't take advantage of the earth because if you did, then it would not provide for your needs. So you made sure that you took care of the soil, that you took care of the waters, that you took care of the trees and the plants and nurtured them, because that is what God gave them in order to survive. We have gotten to the point in humanity and in human history where we think we create everything that we need. Go to Genesis 1 and 2, the big creation story. God created the heaven and the earth. I've read it a few times today before church, and I read it a number of times this week. You know what I can't find anywhere? That God created the microwave. How many of you have microwaves in your house? Most of us do. How many of us really rely on the microwave? Yeah, most of us do, especially when it's like, oh shoot, it's 4 o'clock, I didn't take anything out for dinner, what can I defrost? And we look at all these things around us and we think we make them. They come from, and we don't realize that everything that is there, from the microwave to the clock to the pews to the carpet, everything around us, the material came from the gifts of God. And in order for us to have so much, then things have to be taken. The problem is we keep taking and not doing anything to take care. We're not being good neighbors. So I guess my prayer for myself, for all of you, for us as a congregation, is that we take some time to evaluate where we are. To evaluate what we have. To evaluate what we need. Not what we want, but what we need. And we take time to evaluate our impact on God's creation. Positive and negative. And that we come together and prayerfully discern how we, as South Congregational Church of St. Johnsbury, Vermont, how we might be good neighbors to God's glorious creation. How we might be the Good Samaritans for the 21st century.